Get more on this with Ibrahim Jala, who's a non-resident scholar with the Middle East Institute's Arabian Peninsula programme and a senior consultant. Thanks ever so much for coming on the programme. Now, these talks were aiming for a ceasefire, but are there concrete hopes now for something more permanent?
I think, let me begin with underscoring the significance of this step before just answering this question. It comes after 8 years of indecisive military operations. Neither the coalition achieved an outright military victory, nor the Houthis took over all of Yemen. That perception of lack of victory for either party does make this, the promise that the government wanted of military victory is now replaced by a Saudi visit to negotiate with the Houthis in Sana'a based on Omani mediation. This to the government was never seen or anticipated 8 years ago. It means a strategic change in how Saudi Arabia is now dealing with enemies, but also with friends alike. So do we expect something big? Now the talk about the expansion and renewal of the truce is also accompanied by a number of issues. These include the departure of coalition forces, the payment of salaries, the reopening of Sana'a airport for more destinations, unhindered access of goods into Hodeidah port, as well as the formation of technical committees for truce, for the discussion of unifying the monetary policy, and above all, there is the thought that this will be followed by the launch of intra-Yemeni peace talks, and I think that is the most important aspect, because in the past 4 years, the Houthis have made clear preconditions to engage in intra-Yemeni peace talks. These were departure of the coalition, leaving of what they call the blockade or restrictions, as well as this kind of deal that gives them the political recognition.
So a lot to be hopeful about, but there is still a long way to go with negotiation, isn't there? Big challenges.
There are significant challenges moving forward because the current endeavour tackles the regional aspect exactly as Paul noted, following the Saudi-Iranian rapprochement, which is obviously one of the implications here. But this is just one facet. The multi-layered scope of issues and concerns that different Yemeni stakeholders have not been addressed just yet. And this means that only an inclusive representative political process would be necessary to tackle these. The regional aspect is just one layer, but for as far as Yemenis are concerned, for the long run, and to avert a new cycle of violence, there is a lot to discuss politically, security-wise, humanitarian, economic, and I think the thing that could either help mitigate and caution and the current discussions underway are, of course, the security and military arrangements. Because at the end of the day, if you end up having, certain Saudi-Houthi understandings and the formation of a national unity agreement, and maybe the expansion of the Presidential Leadership Council to include some Houthi members, then it might eventually become a hostage. And that's exactly what many do not want to see in the future. They want to see balance of power, representation, and a path to sustainable peace rather than a tactical de-escalation. What we have at the moment is a roadmap for de-escalation. It has yet to be a roadmap for peace.
You talk about this roadmap, but we've got widespread hunger and poverty. We've got weapons and bombs that have been sent to various factions. I mean, big questions about what's going to happen to all of that. So if a peace deal is struck soon, what's going to happen next in terms of putting the country back together again?
I think, making up the country again would depend on how long the peace between Yemenis, by Yemenis, and for Yemenis is going to take. It might take, months. It might take even much more than that. But as far as the humanitarian crisis is concerned, I think the immediate benefits in terms of resumption of payment of salaries, reunification of the resources that the Houthis generate, combined with the government, and reflect that on civil servant payments. In addition to, of course, cautioning the sources of violence that also have resulted in non-violent suffering. And then you have, of course, the normalization of life in some segments, among others. So these are direct benefits for the civilians who have incurred heavy costs during the past years. But I'm afraid if this is not sustained with a strategic view, which focuses on nurturing the sources of stability and security from within Yemen itself, given that you have now many actors who have hybrid levels of governance and security provisions, and also varying levels of position of heavy and medium arms, I'm afraid that these can play out in ways unseen before, which might mean for Yemen and Yemenis the internalization of the conflict. And as a result, the conflict might be less heard of. And therefore, as we've seen between the 1965 and 1970s, after the Saudis and Egyptians left, and we had the Republican and the Royalist forces have the first round of talks in Harad 1965, might have that internalization. So there are more hopes, but there is much more to do in terms of commitment and intent and international regional backing.
A long journey ahead. Ibrahim Jala, thank you very much.